Core Conversations. My name's Danielle.
Hi, I am Dr. April Metler, physical therapist here at CC's.
Perfect. So today we're talking about bladder myths and healthy habits.
Good.
So tell me what you know.
Well, the Diet Coke I just had laying here is a terrible start to a bladder habit conversation.
Perfect.
So bladder hygiene, we don't often think about it. We think kind of how we function every day is normal because that's just I go to the bathroom. We don't think about it.
Right.
But there is a lot of like red flags that you have poor bladder hygiene, and just some norms that are guidelines that we'd like to use in order to tell whether or not there is a dysfunction in our micturition loop, which is what the technical term for bladder hygiene is.
Wow, that's a big word.
It is. Yes. So when we look at frequency, or like the few things we look at with bladder hygiene is nighttime urination, frequency, and whether or not there is an urge, like an intense urge to use the restroom associated with the urge to go to the bathroom.
Okay.
So from a frequency standpoint, frequency of urination means how often throughout the day am I going? Every 2 hours, 3 hours, how often throughout the day? So a normal, can you take a guess as to how normal would be normal?
Oh gosh. Throughout the day or throughout the night?
Throughout the day.
Throughout the day, 5 to 6.
So every 3 to 4 hours is roughly what we shoot for when we are looking at a premenopausal woman throughout the day.
Okay.
Now, things that affect the bladder frequency can be a caffeine intake, alcohol intake, or even just eating a highly acidic diet, such as lots of tomato-based products, lots of citrusy products can increase that bladder frequency. Okay. But when we look at it as an organic, how should our bladders function? It should be an every 3 to 4 hour urge to go to the bathroom, followed by a full void. During the night, how often is normal to get it up in the middle of the night?
Once or twice?
Zero.
Okay. Well, I think I need to see somebody about that then.
If you are a premenopausal state, getting up in the middle of the night, unless of course you're like lactating, and a lot of times if we're lactating, we're up in the middle of the night anyways.
Right.
But we should not be waking in the middle of the night for the purposes of peeing. The urge to urinate should never wake us up. This is a sign of a very overactive bladder, or of some type of dysfunction or disruption in between your normal bladder function and possibly like a neuromuscular function.
Gotcha. So like a lot of people pee like just in case, or like have that just in case urgency, like I'll just go just to be on the safe side. Is that normal then?
No. So we never, when we were growing up, your mom would tell you like, go to the bathroom before we leave the house.
Yeah.
And sometimes these habits stick. And so our body is set up to give us all of the indications that it's time for us to go to the bathroom.
Right.
And when we ignore those or disrupt those for a certain period of time, our body stops using its internal mechanisms that would make our bladders and our pelvic floor work. So what should normally happen throughout the day, there's stretch receptors within your bladder. Okay. So my bladder is partway full right now. And so there's little stretch receptors in my brain telling me like, hey, like your bladder's filling. You might have to go to the bathroom in the next couple hours. This is the urge that I would ignore and go about my daily life. Then as your bladder continues to fill, because it is a constant process, it's not a start and stop process. Yeah. When it gets to another point where it's at its capacity or close to its like voiding capacity, you would get a stronger urge to go to the bathroom, one that you wouldn't want to ignore, and you would go find a restroom. At that time, our pelvic floor relaxes and our bladder contracts to evacuate all of the urine. So there is always a little bit of residual volume in your bladder, but a normal voiding pattern should occur. Bladder is contracting all on its own. When we're done going to the bathroom, the bladder relaxes because it is one big muscle. Our pelvic floor re-engages and we go about our business, and that continues on. So women that disrupt this normal response, we call that the jicking, where just in case peeing, your body is like losing, it's kind of becoming desensitized to all these processes. So you just go all the time, even though you don't really have the urge to go to the bathroom, which is not, will lead to eventually like oftentimes other things.
Right. So then we talk about like how you should be going 3 to 4, like every 3 to 4 hours.
Correct.
So then what about the people that go like 8 to 10 hours without going to the restroom? Like there's got to be a flip side to this.
Yeah. You know, we call those people camels. And honestly, as long as you're well hydrated and as long as you don't have a history of like urinary tract infections, some people do have either it's a larger holding volume. Maybe their stretch receptors are located somewhere else in the bladder that
Okay.
would affect that. Um, but the signs of danger, I guess we would say, is the
Yeah.
chronic urgency. So like if when you get the urge to go to the bathroom, like you have to run to the bathroom or it's going to fall out your leg.
Mhm.
Um, that's a sign of a bladder
Okay.
dysfunction or a pelvic floor dysfunction or some type of neuromuscular dysfunction between your bladder and your pelvic floor.
Wow.
So we always just want to remember, um, oftentimes people will think, well, if I have urgency with urination, or if I'm going to the bathroom too much,
Mhm.
or if I'm going to the bathroom at night, I should restrict fluids. And actually, this can increase all of those things because your
Mhm.
bladder lining can become irritated because the more dehydrated we are, the more irritating it is to the bladder lining. So your concentrated urine is more irritated to the bladder lining,
Okay.
which is then going to tell your bladder to get rid of it faster. So oftentimes, increasing fluid volume will decrease frequency and urgency. And it's something that like physical therapists can walk you through on how to go through that process.
Okay.
Oftentimes there's like a musculoskeletal component to it also that we can address that gets rid of those things.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So another really big thing that patients talk about too is leaking.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So leaking, like incontinence, I guess, is the definition of like an involuntary loss of urine. So there's several different types of incontinence. So urge
Mm.
incontinence is when I have the intense urge to go and I can't find a bathroom, nor can I control it. So then I leak urine. Stress incontinence is laugh, cough, sneeze, jump, and you leak urine.
Mhm.
And there's all sorts of like functional incontinence, like I go to pick up my kid and I pee my pants, things like that.
Mhm.
So, incontinence kind of sometimes gets drifted into things that are like normal parts of aging, normal parts of childbirth, normal parts of all sorts of things, or they can be associated with 16-year-old girls playing basketball.
Okay.
And basically, like incontinence is just some type of impairment between the bladder and the pelvic floor not responding to each other like they should. People always assume if I'm leaking, I should just do more strengthening exercises and it'll get
Mhm.
better. But oftentimes, pelvic floor exercises aren't necessarily the cure for incontinence because it's not always associated to weakness. And
Gotcha.
so there's no way of really knowing how that looks until somebody can evaluate it. Obviously, a 16-year-old athlete is not weak.
Right.
She has like a motor coordination issue that we
Okay.
can address really easy.
That's interesting. You hear so much about like how older people have the issue with leaking or the
Hmm.
incontinence issue, but you rarely hear about, like you said, like the 16-year-olds that have that issue. So it's kind of intriguing to me to see that like that does happen.
Yep, I think they say the prevalence in some research is the prevalence of urinary incontinence sometime in a teenager's life is like 60%
Holy.
amongst athletes. And those are like your athletic populations. So then we
Yeah.
think about like the less athletic population,
Hmm.
if there's weakness involved and things like that. But it's a very common thing, but it's not necessarily normal. And it's definitely
Right.
something that can be addressed. And there's not a canned application of how you would fix incontinence. It's not to fix incontinence, do this, and it's going to fix all problems because the root of the problem is different in most people.
Right.
And we also, you have to apply the function to it. So I'm only incontinent when I pick up my 50-pound child. So
Hmm.
what function, like neuromuscular components aren't working when I lift something. So we
Right.
have to put it into function as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So in the previous episode, we talked about like pelvic floor strengthening, things like that. What's better than a Kegel? Very controversial topic.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, are there things we kind of talked a little, or you touched on a little bit earlier too, training your bladder? Like, what kind of steps would you recommend as a PT to do that? I know it's kind of
Yeah.
based on what they're doing or
Yeah.
what they've got going on, but just in general things.
So I would say the first thing you need to do is look at your fluid intakes. So the
Hmm.
easiest thing to do is to start by eliminating a lot of your bladder irritants,
Okay.
which would be the caffeine, alcohol, artificial sweeteners is a big one. So if you're drinking a diet Sprite, then the sucralose or the
Yeah.
artificial sweetener in there is actually a bladder irritant. So you want to eliminate those first just to give your body like a good baseline. So this
Okay.
is like an organic bladder full of fluid,
Yeah.
but nothing that is irritating. So then from that point, we log how often you are going.
Yeah.
So like people start writing down, I went to the bathroom at 8 a.m., 10 a.m., noon, 12:30. And so then we can kind of see where you're averaging. So are you averaging every hour and a half? And if that's the case, then what we'll try to do is a technique called urge suppression techniques. And
Okay.
urge suppression is that we utilize our pelvic floor to try to get the bladder to be quiet. And so
Hmm.
this is not cross your legs, do the happy dance, but your pelvic floor and your bladder should work opposite of each other. So then when we practice urge suppression by
Okay.
contracting your pelvic floor, in theory, your bladder should relax. So
Gotcha.
we say, you have been averaging going to the bathroom every 90 minutes. Now we're
Hmm.
going to try to push it to 2 hours. So if you get the urge between 90 minutes and 2 hours, do like 3 strong Kegel exercises. So squeeze the pelvic floor up, relax completely, squeeze the pelvic floor up, relax completely, and see if the urge goes away. And if the
Okay.
urge subsides, perfect. Wait for the 2 hour mark. If you feel like you're still going to pee your pants, then just go to the bathroom. But it's one way to kind of like reinforce that inverse relationship between the bladder and the pelvic floor to get your body to start desensitizing to that, like, I feel a
Yeah.
little stretch and I just must go pee.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people experience that when they get home from work or something.
Yeah.
They've gone through a long work day and they're like, I need to go to the bathroom right when I get home.
Yes.
So, I think you guys did a video at one point in time where Kadra had sat on the chair when she got home and she was like,
Yeah.
okay, I just need to sit for a second and then
Great.
we'll see.
Yep.
Yeah.
You should really try to break the pattern between urgency and going to the bathroom. So even
Hmm.
deep diaphragmatic breathing, just something that calms the nervous system before you void is part of the processes that have to be broke, because it becomes like an attached, like a brain pathway that becomes attached instead of actually what your body is doing.
Absolutely. Really quick question here. What do you like about being a pelvic health physical therapist at CC's here?
I think that's where the whole slogan "We will change your mind" comes from, because there's so much information out there, good and bad, for women to digest.
Hmm.
And teaching people some of the simplest things can be the biggest life
Right.
changing thing. I had this old lady one time who told me she was at the age where you don't buy bananas that aren't ripe to eat,
Okay.
but also learned how to poop for the first time in her life,
Oh, wow.
because I told her just to slouch when she poops, and then she was fine. She's like, why didn't somebody tell me this
Yeah.
60 years ago? So it's like small things that make a big impact.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's really great that what we do here at CC's is that we make small moves to make big impacts.
Yes.
So,
Cool.
but that's it for us on this episode. Join us next time. We can't wait to see you. Thanks so much.
Bye bye.